world predictions. Now, I know you have a lot to tell us because I know the style you have. And I will chime in at some point, try to keep it as a natural conversation between us and be careful not to interrupt. But if I do, do me the biggest favor and come back at it.
Okay.
Don't let my eagerness scare you away.
No,
Okay?
no.
Because that I do get really eager and I try not to, but I do.
You know what? I'm the same way. So I am going to try to, I get it totally. Like when you have so much enthusiasm and
Yeah.
so much to share, I get
Yeah.
it. So let's do this as a back and forth. Both of us are going to make that effort to do it in
Okay.
a loving way.
Right
Yeah.
on.
Yeah.
So I have the tarot cards, and I'm going to let you start with the vibration, what we can look forward to, and what we need to worry about, or what we need to plan ahead for. But could we not just focus on U.S. and Canada?
Of course. Yeah. If we're doing world events. Yeah, of course. I mean, I really like to, I think you might be better at talking about like world events per se. I like to talk about big energies. I like to talk about big trends, especially historical trends that have
Oh,
been, also what it is that we can look forward to. And so, yeah, I'm
I
sure
like
that we'll
that.
find our right balance and our right way for sure.
Sounds perfect. Please lead the way, my friend.
Okay, so I am actually going to start with, if I may, can we talk about March? Because I feel like March is the month when everything really starts to feel different. Everything is likely to change. I mean, March is such a massive month with big celestial planets changing signs, entering new phases. And I think that is when we really are going to start to feel like things are different. It peaks in May, and then we get a little bit of a respite after that to a certain extent, especially once we get into June. And so let's talk about March in particular. A few things off the top of my head. Saturn changes signs. So after 28 and a half years, Saturn is returning to the sign of Pisces. And wherever Saturn goes, it makes us get real, look at how things actually are, but also represents an element of restriction as well. And I think this is so interesting. I think that this whole rise in astrology in particular that I've seen since 2012 has been because of Neptune in Pisces and this desire that more of us have for spiritual connection, spiritual meaning, spiritual experience. Well, what happens when there's a restrictive factor there? We're asked to really embody that spirituality more. So that's just one way that energy might be realized. But the very big news that I think everybody is talking about, lots of people ask me like daily, Pluto is going to dip into the sign of Aquarius. And I think that represents a huge cultural shift. We'll get a little taste of it this year, a little taste next year before we more comfortably move into that cycle. But altogether, it'll be a 20-year cycle. And, Pluto and Aquarius, I have been saying, I remember back in 2018, 2019 saying, the world that we start the 2020s with will be a very different world that we end the 2020s with. And it really is Pluto dipping into Aquarius that represents the very beginning of that. What do you think? What are you feeling about what's coming up this year?
Couple of years ago, I predicted because I dreamt that we would have a revolution, and I dreamt that it would start in mid to late February, where the brewings behind the scenes would be going on. We may not know it, but it is. It's even being spoken of as we speak today. But by late February, it's going to be a thrust. And so what I think I'm feeling and seeing is that mid March, it's going to kick it. It's going to be kicked up. By May, anybody who wasn't paying attention will know there may be a revolution in front of us.
And
Yeah.
when you say revolution, how do you feel that? Not how do you feel that, but what do you mean by that, and where do you feel that that is likely?
I think many countries, first starting in the US, then sliding into Canada, and other countries will take form. Well, let's just look at it. It's like the truck convoy on steroids. And the convoy did not get violent, but there may be more violence this time around. The convoy did not produce looting. This time around, there will be this type of thing. So I don't want to put a fear mongering thing out there because it's about the only thing that can shift us. How might we take our countries back otherwise? Now, I don't see it as bad as, let's say, Russia and Ukraine. No, I don't see that. If anything, it'd be more civil upheaval and blatant disrespect and rebellious folks against government. I think there will be. I don't know how to say this word, but to make it simple, an overtaking of our governments, and I'm not sure how civilized that's going to look yet. But I do think that's going to be pushed, and the government's going to have to come to task and acquiesce.
That's what you're feeling. It's interesting because I'm thinking about how the last time we had the conjunction of Saturn and Pluto, well, the more recent last time was January of 2020, right? That conjunction in the sign of Capricorn, the last time that happened was the Protestant Reformation. And if you think about what the Protestant Reformation represented, it was a reconfiguring of our relationship to power and our relationship to God itself. I mean, what helps us to know ourselves differently other than knowing our relationship to a higher power differently in some way? That really is what the Protestant Reformation represented.
Well,
It took the power away from the intermediaries, which the Catholic Church represented, and put the power in your ability to read the text and decide what it means, read the Bible and decide what it means for yourself, which was sacrilege up until the Protestant Reformation. But I think that that really was the force that created the world that we have today. But the other thing to take into consideration as well is we ended 2020 with the great conjunction of Jupiter and Saturn and in Aquarius, right? That 0 degree Aquarius. So we had these really powerful energies there. And when we saw that happen previously, that was the printing press, the invention of the printing press, the beginning of information reaching the masses. And so my friend Rick Levine, I hope you get a chance to talk to Rick
Oh,
Levine.
I know who Rick is. Oh,
He's
yeah.
so amazing, right? We love him. I remember sharing this in a video that we were doing together with a group, and he said, if the Great Conjunction in Aquarius took us from an oral culture to a paper culture, it is going to be now that we move to a paperless culture. So I think it'll be
Absolutely.
interesting to see how that happens. But I actually think of it as the energy of Aquarius is so it's about the collective, but it's also hyper individualistic. It's about what the masses are doing, but it's also hyper niche. And I think that it is likely to be that more people are going to be able to do their own thing, but in their own pockets to decide how they're going to live and what they're going to do.
That's what we were saying. The revolution will produce that. And that is a good thing because this is what we've been kind of wanting for a long time. We really have. We've been spinning out of control with our hurried lives and our city ways and wanting everything so quickly. Like we want satisfaction really quickly, and we need to sort of reach back and pull up some of the old basic ways of managing health wise, for instance, nature, food, growing your own food, understanding herbs, all of it. So I think this revolution is a good one. It's a personal one too, about something in terms of yourself and what you need to change in you to produce what you really want. So, I mean, I'm living in Vancouver Island here, and I'm noticing an interesting change here. People work from 11 till 4, like 11 to 4. We're from Ontario, Toronto. It was like 9 to 6. 7 days a week. Here is lucky if you got a store open 5. That's a lucky thing to find here. So, there's this a realization that we don't want to live like that anymore. And I think that we are also not going to want to live under the thumb of mandates and restrictions that are going to put us out of business again or put us out of our homes again. So I think that kickback is still happening, and people did not get the, let's say, the tax breaks that they had hoped for. They didn't. They didn't. They did a lot of this, and little came. I do think this year will also be any revolution that we have will be instigated by people of color and likely women. So the sort of minority energy will push a lot of this energy forward, and then here we go. So I'm looking forward to the changes. I think this is going to be the one of the biggest years of change, and then we're going to go right into about 30, 40 years of change. So I won't even be here to watch some of the way we go, but there'll be some interesting curves, and I think this is the beginning of a whole new era. This is really the spin-off of what we've been talking about, the age of Aquarius. This is it.
It's interesting what you just said, because ever since I was a small child, I've been convinced that I am going to live to 150 years old. Like, I was talking to a friend and we were saying the Neptune return. I am going to live to the Neptune return. I've been convinced of that. Whenever I think about the energies that are coming up, I remember this show. It was a miniseries, a star-studded miniseries at that, on HBO, called Years and Years. And so in the first episode of this show, the little girl comes to her parents and she says, and she looks really perplexed and really troubled by something, and she says, you know, I have to tell you guys something. I think I'm trans. And so her parents say to her, you know what? We love you, whether you're a boy or a girl, we're here in support for you. And the girl looks confused and she says, no, not transgender, transhuman. And so, and then she starts talking about how there's this technology that allows you to upload your consciousness into the cloud so that you basically can live forever. And this makes her parents very upset, and doors slam and screaming happens and all of that. And I was thinking, yeah, like what would happen if we were no longer tethered to the physical existence, if we could be pure consciousness to know ourselves that way? We're already on that path. I mean, you think about how incredible it is that we manifested the internet,
Right?
manifested what we call the World
Yeah.
Wide Web, right? We talk
Yep.
about, especially in magical circles, how there's this universal web that connects us to everyone and everything. And we've manifested this thing that allows us to be pure consciousness in a virtual space. But what
Yeah.
happens when that space takes on greater importance and becomes all consuming, right? So it's interesting to consider. I will say, based on some of the things you shared, when I look at how astrologically, it just looks like we're going in a direction of you do you and I'm going to do me.
Yeah.
That's the direction it seems to be going in. This hyper niche world, and allowing everybody to be who they are, because I'm going to be who I am and I'm going to do
Yeah.
what I'm going to do. And so it makes sense that some of those niches will be very nature oriented, very rooted in that world. Some of those niches are going to want to reject and be off
Yeah.
grid per se.
That.
So, and then of course others won't. Other people will not necessarily be thinking
Yeah.
along those lines. I am an Aquarius after all. I love technology.
Yeah.
I'm so grateful for being
Yeah.
plugged in a sense.
Well, it's
Although,
true.
yeah,
I think we're going to, just like you said, we learned about division when we realized not everybody got the vax, or some people didn't want to mask up, and people, everybody started having different opinions. We saw it on Facebook, people stopping friendships because of their divided thoughts. But I think we're going to learn to understand that in each other as an okay thing, because you know it's your mother that thinks different than you. You can't get rid of her. You like her. So you're going to start to soften up and be okay with, these different ways of thinking, different unusual ways of thinking. I think that technology is going to take an interesting turn. We were talking about this actually with some of the other psychics I spoke of, Tara Green and Michelle Marie, and I don't know which one of us were talking about it, but I had envisioned many years ago about something that you walk by. It's a cylinder, and you walk by, open it, go in like a telephone booth, and there's this thing, you take it, you plunk it over your top of your head, you put your coins in, and you just stand there holding onto this thing. I don't know what this thing is, but you're holding onto this thing. Almost looks like you're going to look through a telescope, but you're just holding onto that. That's there, and you get this charge. It's called the brain gym in my mind, okay? And then someone mentioned, and this is why I brought up the subject of this vision I had, and it was an Asian country that it was first produced, this particular thing. And there was lineups at 3 o'clock because I guess that's the flatline time, right? When everybody needs more energy. But have you ever seen the movie Elysium? I think it's called, where it was a country, it was a world, an Earth that was dying. And so they created another world that spun in this thing right off in the atmosphere of Earth. And all the elites lived there, and all the people who couldn't afford to live there lived on Earth. But some of the people from Earth got there by one of these ships. And there were things called medic beds. I'm not sure if that's exactly what they called it in the show, but you would go up to it, you'd lie down, and it would tell you exactly what's wrong with you, and then it would fix you.
Wow.
I'm hoping for that. Now,
Yeah.
we might be a few years off, something like that, but that kind of technology might be tweaking right about now.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's already in the works. I remember not that long ago seeing how there are now like computer programs and scanning programs where they they can do that, and a computer can figure out what's really going on, what the probability is of different things that doctors very often might miss. But
Yeah.
of course, there's that tension, right, between, and I think this is what we're going to move forward from, but you think about how Pluto has been in Capricorn since 2008. We've been feeling that energy. And in many ways, it's only solidified and strengthened power in a sense.
Absolutely.
And especially the hierarchy. Um, and so it'll be interesting to see how it is that we start moving in a world that's much more, I think with Pluto and Aquarius, it's much more empirical. It's much more science based. It's much more rooted in what the data shows us. But the problem is historically, when we enter timeframes like that, when we have places in the world like that, they tend to not be very friendly to
Mhm.
astrologers. They tend to not be very friendly to those of us who practice the esoteric arts. And so my hope is that in this new place that we are moving into, we're allowed permission to be who we are, just do our own thing, right?
I,
Like
I,
that's what I'm really hoping for, is that,
I do. I
yeah,
think this year will produce much more spiritual alignment within many more people. And even though I'm saying that I see a revolution coming and that's violent, that doesn't mean that there isn't a lot more people stepping up and taking responsibility for their spiritual faith, whatever that might be. Religious faith has lost a lot of its luster. And that has been made very clear to us what happened with our children, our native children, and all the findings that we are recovering of, like terrible situation that we're seeing unfold, and it's only going to get worse. And what I will say about that for this year is MMIW is going to get a lot more press time and interest and support by the colonial groups, okay, the policing colonial groups, because of something very interesting that I sense is going to happen, and they may reveal where these people are being taken from. And I think it's a group, it's more than one. And I think it has to do with the oil rigs. And this is something that I saw in my reading the other day, is that it may very well push someone to find out what's really happening. And this will bring MMIW's awareness right to the top and begin the healing, because we'll find out who's doing it and be able to stop it.
What
But it,
is MIW? I'm sorry. I don't
moving,
really keep track
all
of news and stuff like that so much. I'm very, very blessed that I can, unlike a lot of people, I am able to sort of decide on my world. And I know
yeah.
that's a great privilege. So, yes, what is that?
Well, I'm part Native, and missing and murdered Indigenous women,
Oh,
and all the things that are going on with the Catholic school and residential schools, and the Native children that are being found in unmarked graves is what I was talking about with that.
mm,
And so I think this area of our First People will start to get some real stage time and real support and money. And I do think there will be some findings and some people taking accountability for, or being forced into accountability. So I think this year is going to produce something like that, and I for one, am really happy to know that, because it just breaks my heart to see this happening, and really nothing happening about it. Like no
mm,
one's stepping up and doing anything about it. But I do think that's going to change. So that's a good thing. I think
a
that's a
very
good
good
thing
thing.
for this year.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
and I,
Incredible.
what do you think? I'd like to hear what you have to think about something. What do you think about the energies of war? I mean, yes, revolution is one thing, but war is another energy. And with Ukraine and Russia and the stuff going on with China, I'm really curious what you think. I really trust what you have to say or think about this, and I'd like to know what you think.
Okay, so here's a couple of things though. I don't really like to predict war or violence or anything. And the reason is because I'll tell you why. Many, many years ago, the late great Jonathan Caner, right, one of the great leaders in astrology. Well, he was a popular astrologer. He certainly was an incredibly, I would say, influential astrologer. He passed away a few years ago, but he talked about in an interview that he did about how he wrote daily horoscopes in England that ended up, of course, reaching the whole world. And in his daily horoscopes, once he wrote something about release and letting go and stuff like that, and somebody read that and they took it as a sign that for them to commit suicide was
Oh,
blessed, like this was the time. And the person did, sorry, trigger warning there, I should have said in
yeah,
advance.
for sure.
Yeah, my apologies. But yeah, and the people, a person took that to mean that. And after that, Jonathan Caner became really diligent with how he expressed his ideas, what it was that he shared. And so I took that very much to heart. That to me, I'm always very cautious around that kind of thing. I remember when January 6th and the attack, January 6th that happened, I know how the world, many of us were incredibly shocked and in disbelief around that. But when you look at how Mars, there was a retrograde and it was sort of, it culminated with Mars at 29 degrees of Aries. And so there was going to be something like some sort of aggressive output that was going to, some violence was set to take place. And of course, I didn't want to say anything. Like, I didn't want to give anybody permission to go be violent and kill, 6 law enforcement people or whatever it was
Yeah,
that died that day. Right. And so I will say this, we are going to be coming up to in the middle of May. We have something happening, which is Jupiter crossing over that 29-degree Aries point. And just as Jupiter does that, Jupiter will then, that's going to happen we're going to feel that from the 13th to the 15th into the 19th of May. And then we get to the 16th of May, and it is Jupiter that moves into Taurus and immediately sets up a very rare configuration called a fixed grand cross with Pluto, with Mars, with the nodes. And that is set to be one of the real turning points of the year. Now, I will say this. If you think back, a few years back, I remember every month or so, we were hearing about women escaping Saudi Arabia. I'm just going to say it, right? I'm going to be really blunt with it. My parents are feminists. And a big part of their feminism is rooted in, when I was growing up, there was this awareness that women in the world, there are places in the world where women will never have the opportunities that I do and never have the freedom that I do simply because of where they're born and where they live. And so I should maximize my potential to the best of my ability. Like that is something I grew up with. It was drilled into me. And so we kept hearing about these women sort of being stopped by foreign governments, and then they would go online, and then immediately some government would come forward to help. Many of them got a refugee status, you know, thankfully in Canada. Another reason I'm so proud to be Canadian, and Australia as well. However, there was a one after one time that this happened, there was like this joke that happened from the higher ups in Saudi Arabia that, oh, we should have taken away their phone, ha ha ha. After that joke was made, we never heard of anything like that happening again. And the same thing happened in India, in Kashmir, when the government came and took over this land. The first thing they did was they shut down the internet because they knew that the internet gives people a voice, it's power. And right now, look, we just finished up a Mars retrograde, but Mars is in shadow. And in mid-March, we are going to have Mars at 29 of Gemini. That is an energy of the internet as well. And to me, this all speaks to how, you know, again, as much as I would love to think revolution and freedom and stuff, and I, you know, I prize that. It's such a dear value of mine as an Aquarius myself. I think that big governments have become very good at controlling the internet and figuring out how to put those limitations there. So how do we break past that? And what does that actually mean in terms of how people are able to connect with each other and figure out how to mobilize as well? So it'll be interesting to see our own ingenuity in moving around that. But yeah, these are going to be really important moments to watch, like what happens in mid-May. I think with the as soon as that happens, 29 Jupiter in Aries, as soon as that happens, immediately we go into this world of this tension, this control, this desire to keep things as they are, and efforts taken to keep things as they are. I think that should be an interesting moment to watch. Either that Jupiter is going to bring healing and moving forward, or it's going to bring new systems that prevent something like that from happening again. And depending on your own values, you're looking at that as good or bad. It's not my place to judge that, right? For me personally, I try to be as unbiased as possible.
Yeah, I respect that.
Yeah.
I respect that. I respect where you're going with that. And I appreciate you sharing the energy that we'll be presented with on that level. Because then, you know, it's good to sit back with it. I have stepped out and said what I feel. That, you know, like I said, that could come back and haunt me. And I hope it doesn't. I don't think it will because of the way the information came to me. But you know what? I've been living through COVID like everyone else, and it changed it. It changed us. It changed a lot of who we are, what we believe in, where we're sitting, all of it. I think it made a lot of changes. And you know, when I look at what's happening, let's say with Ukraine and Russia, I actually think there's going to this year will get them to stop fighting. I actually think that's going to happen. Am I dreaming it in? Am I hoping it to be? You know, yes, I am. I am doing that. And maybe everyone will do that. And that in itself is the magic that makes it happen. You know, we are images of the gods being the planets. I mean, we are images of that. So if we work from that energy and we use the energy, as you're saying, in these good ways, we can produce just as much good as we can negative, even with a dark situation. So, you know, I'm hoping for this. I'm not just hoping it. I dreamt it, I felt it, and then I looked at it, and then I went, yes, I'm hoping for this. So I do hope for good stuff. Then, as far as China, just because I said I would speak on it, I personally, I think China's a troubled energy, and we need to keep our eyes open and about what they're doing and when they're doing it. We need to be really paying attention, not necessarily because of war, but just because of the secrecy, you know, and those types of things. So because they're in my opinion can be considered, I would say, a wild card. Although we already know a wild card can do damage, we know that much. but how much? We're not certain of. But I know there's some very interesting energy coming in June. I concur. I also looked into that and felt some very interesting energy being available to all of us in June. And it could be a smoothing of the chaotic energy, or getting accustomed to it, or being okay with the new norm, that kind of a thing. I like that. I like that. And like, there is no perfection. It doesn't matter which year we look at. We're always going to have something. That's what life is. Ebb and flow, good and bad, light and dark. I mean, we can't just expect 50 shades of gray, or can we? You know,
Well, if that's what you're into, right? That's
right.
the thing I think we can count on more. If you want 50 Shades of Gray, you get that. If
Yeah.
you are not into gray at all, you don't
Yeah.
have to either. I was just looking up the chart for China. So as you were talking, I was thinking, okay, yeah, let's look at the chart for China, because the thing is that I find it so interesting that in many ways they've been kind of ahead of things that now in many other places they're catching up on, in terms of surveillance, in terms of CCTV cameras, in terms of social rankings and things like that. They've been way ahead. Now that kind of stuff is terrifying to a lot of us, right? We feel like, oh no, we don't want that much being checked into. But it's interesting. When I did go to Southeast Asia in 2017. So over the course of a couple of months, I sort of traveled to several countries and cities. And I remember when I went to South Korea, and on the plane, I was talking to somebody there, and he was talking about how, in South Korea, they have so many cameras everywhere that you could be walking down the street and someone could steal your wallet. And by the time you get to the end of the street 10 minutes later, you don't even realize your wallet is missing. And a police officer shows up with your wallet in their hand, saying, they saw somebody do it. They caught that person. They got your wallet and they're giving it back to you now. Like, that's how much surveillance is there.
Yep.
And now, I mean, I think about our world today, especially we could say a post 9/11 world, the world we started this millennia with, right? And since then, there's been more and more and more cameras everywhere. There are some really great things about that in a way, because I feel like it is very hard for and again, sorry, I'm going to say somebody's name, bit of a trigger warning here, Ted Bundy. It's very hard for a Ted Bundy or a Jeffrey Dahmer to exist anymore, because there are cameras everywhere, because of DNA technology. I mean, in a way, thank goodness for these things. But then also, if people are watching to keep crime low, that's a great thing. But then if they're watching, right? That's just part of how it ends up working. So it'll be
Yeah.
interesting to see how much of that energy we end up taking on more, and what works in terms of what we won't take on, what we will. But yeah, I mean, China is an example of really going to that place of of hyper vigilance, of hyper being watched, hyper monitored, to a place where a lot of us in the West just don't feel is okay, don't feel comfortable with, and yet much of China and the Chinese people are okay with that. They do say that they like that because it helps them and their kids get into better schools and so on. So it'll be interesting to see. But just looking at the chart of China, I mean, it is a Capricorn country. And so that's the big power. The hierarchy that exists there is very, very strong. But they're going to start to have, Pluto and Aquarius. I'd like to say it could change things, but with so much control and a hyper control of the internet, which is likely to be the case with Pluto and Aquarius, I'm not sure how, but I hope that those people, at least if we have the freedom to live our lives on our own terms, even if in our own corners of the world, that would be, that would be amazing. That would be great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I'm just going to send some peace out energy to China,
Mhm.
peace out energy to Russia. And,
Yeah.
and I don't know the complications of what's going on there, but even some to Ukraine, because really we all just need to mellow out. We need to back
All the places in the
all.
world. Yeah. Yeah.
We all
totally.
do. I just want to say something before we move on. Anyone who's in the room, please stop for a second and tap that screen, and that will help throw our session, our live, back into the algorithm. And if you can, and if you don't mind, please hit that share button and try to share it if you can, either on your own TikTok or in your message area or on your Facebook or whatever, because we are very soon going to get into the zodiac signs and nobody's going to want to miss it. So
Yeah, yeah, let's do
yeah,
that at the
so
time that
please
we
tap
have
the screen,
for.
everyone. Tap, tap, tap the screen, just like that. You'll notice. Oh wait, what's going on here? See all the hearts that I'm sending you? That's how you
Yeah,
do it.
thank
Tap
you.
the screen.
I
That's
don't,
sending some love to the room and to everyone out there. And it does throw you back into the algorithm. So it's a lot to learn. And sometimes when you put certain words in your description, you can get monitored and censored by TikTok,
oh
which
wow.
we might have. Oh, thank you. Thank you for
Thank you.
that.
What was that? That looked amazing.
Yeah,
Wow.
those are
This
the
is my
gifts
first
they
time
can
doing
pick.
TikTok live. I just have posted a small handful of videos so far. But what was that? That beautiful
Well,
heart and
there are gifts up at the top on the right hand side. There's an area where you can gift, also in the bottom. And people who have that you buy coupons basically, and so many coupons will buy certain gifts, and then you can send. She bought the hand hearts, as you can see where it says that in the messenger.
Mhm.
And they can also see there. Oh, there's Carmen. She's sending us some roses.
Oh,
And
thank
hi,
you.
Carmen, by the way. And I know Jem is in here. I saw her. She's one of my subscriptions. She has subscribed. Some people subscribe. And this is why no one's able to communicate right now. There's Jem.
Oh, there's some birds, and isn't that
Yeah.
cute? Isn't that amazing? No,
Yeah.
and I do see some familiar names as well, of people who follow me. So thank you if you're finding me and you're one of the
Good.
people who follow me. Thank you so much for being
Yeah.
here.
Yes, please do follow my friend here. And it's just Nadiya Shah, right?
Nadiya.Shah. Yeah,
Okay.
here.
Okay. All
Yeah.
right. So we'll definitely make sure my people are following you too. I'll be cutting and pasting much of this and posting it, reposting it back onto my TikTok. And sometimes we get some virals. I mean, I got a viral 1.9 million, I think, on a Virgo 20 January 2023 prediction. And so many people resonated with it. It was unreal. And I don't know how I did it, but whatever. It's wonderful when you get something like that to happen. And the more we do, the more we put out, the more people get to see us, the more people we can help. And isn't that the whole purpose of what we're doing?
Yeah, isn't it? That's so true. Yeah.
Hmm. So
And
what do you think Canada, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to
okay,
interrupt.
go.
What do you think we can look forward to in Canada?
In Canada, let's have a look at the Canadian chart. Astrology chart. I mean, I'm really hopeful that with Pluto and Aquarius, but also Saturn and Pisces as well. And Pisces is an energy of like spirituality, right? And we think about the world that we've created over the last 2000 years that we're starting to transition out of, which is the age of Pisces. And it saw this rise of really spiritual forces, spirituality. It saw the rise of a desire for spiritual experience, but also, yeah, institutions of spirituality as well. Really were able to harness that power that they had for institutional power. And so it'll be interesting to see. I do think there's this last gasp of that. And I think that, when you talk about uh, the native experience and reconciliation, truth and reconciliation that's happening right now, I'm so hopeful for that. I am of the belief that, you think about how more of us than ever before in the world identify with a land that is not that of our ancestors than ever before in human history. And that's the story of the Americas, right? Now, I am of South Asian origin. I've never been to South Asia yet. And when people ask me what my country is, like, I feel my country is Canada. I feel like this is the place and the land that is my home. And when I see things related to Canada and especially the First Nations experience, I feel that on a depth and a level that I don't necessarily feel where it comes to other places when I think about what home is for me. And so I have such a strong feeling and desire for us to heal on that level of actually being able to bring that healing to the First Nations, and finally respecting them, finally honoring them, keeping our promises to them. And I think that with everything that's happened in terms of finding these mass graves, it's horrific, but finding them, it's almost like the Canadian consciousness is saying, deal with this already. This is the actual history. This is what people actually went through. We've been telling you about this. Now, here is the literal manifestation. The death of that innocence is what that represents. And so, my hope is that how much is coming forward now ultimately is something that we finally, as a country, as a collective consciousness of Canada, finally bring healing and respect to as well. Just acknowledgement. Just if someone is able to acknowledge what another went through, that is a force of healing in and of itself.
Indeed. Yeah.
And so my hope is that that's part of what we start to move towards. I am pulling up the chart, but what do you think? What are
That's,
your
I agree. That's what I was saying. I think that's
ideas?
going to be a big thing for this year for Canada. I think that'll be one of the biggest things. And let's just let that be the headline, because it's time that this became the headline. So I'm happy to end that particular conversation about Canada right there.
Well,
I
there we
I'm
yeah.
curious about the monarchy now too. That's the other thing. Curiosity has me around Britain and the monarchy. What do you think's going on with that?
Well, it's interesting because whenever we've had I think about again the great conjunction that has taken not well, the great conjunction was Jupiter and Saturn, but the conjunction of Saturn and Pluto that happened at the beginning of 2020 in Capricorn, and how that shifts power continuously. And so I feel like a lot of what we saw when this conjunction took place in 2020, we saw a lot of upheaval in places that sort of represented the last gasp of British imperial power. And so I feel like now the monarchy has become it's ceremonial. It's a ceremonial role, it's a symbolic
Mm.
role. And we see people kind of, especially with these, late Pluto in the very late degrees of Capricorn, which has been taking place over the course of this year. You've seen these really interesting ways in which people are showing us this allegiance that they still have, even people in the United States, which has been really interesting. Because in the US, of course, the US isn't possible without its rejection of monarchical power, without it saying no. Like, a hierarchy doesn't exist. Just because you were born a king doesn't mean that you're better than me. We have an innate equality. That country cannot exist without rebelling against the whole notion around which the monarchy exists, which is classist, yes, I will say, but its whole idea around some people are born better than others. Aquarius throws all of that out. And so it'll be interesting to see how it is that Britain continues to address that, evolve with that. But I know just in the last 3 years with Saturn in Aquarius, how many countries have either said that they're no longer a part of the Commonwealth, how it is that countries have already began the process of disconnecting from the Commonwealth, officially so, and what that's going to mean going forward from here. I think it's also very interesting that so much of what I'm seeing Harry go through is exactly what Diana went through. It,
Right?
it's shocking to me. It's incredible to me, and the way in which he has come to embody our need to address and look at and heal around a person being able to live their life on their own terms, not being born into obligation. What is that actually require? But yeah, it's so interesting in that, he has spoken what is true for him. Diana did. Diana got at first some sympathy, but then a whole lot of hostility. That's what's happening with him as well. Diana chose somebody, Dodi Fayed, very different cultural background, very different ethnic background. And that was part of what made her become that much more a magnet to hostility, especially of the media, because she's supposed to be the property of the people. And the same thing now is happening with Harry
Yeah.
based on whom it is that he's chosen to love as well. And the ways in which, people who never read the book, who haven't really contemplated the fact that this is an individual with their own agency and a right to decide their own life, the ways in which these people have been subject to that hostility, the sense that, no, we own you, therefore,
Yeah.
it is shocking to those of us rooted in sensibilities of what the American Revolution was really about. So you see that tension in people, in American people and Canadian people, where the best of the American psyche and the American consciousness at odds with what this very traditional, no, we own you because of whom you were born into and the family you were born into. Very fascinating to see that. But of course, I wish him so well. It'll be interesting to see how he continue. I just think he's living his truth. He's living his life. He's doing the best that he knows how to do. And I think that's it, that he just wants to do his own thing. And so we'll see how that continues for him.
Yeah. Um, I have when I look at I do see the monarchy basically diluted, and it will continue to be diluted until it is a picture on a wall. You know,
Mm-hmm.
and old monarchies, the Buckingham Palace will be a place for us to visit. I think eventually that's where this is headed, and that's probably the way it needs to go. But it will take a little while. But I think this year is the beginning of the end. I really do. And it's not just because the Queen has died, it's because the King is not interested. He's not. He's not interested. He was 40 years ago, but he's not interested anymore. And I just got a weird sense that he's just bypassed it. So I'm looking forward to the end of that, because I think it's outdated. I think it's outdated, and that's okay. And it's not that I have any disapproval for any of it, except I do have issues with the elite. And one of the things that I saw is the USA is going to be, um, I would say, in the headlines regarding the elites and the calling out of some very, very, let's just say, very bad example of elites. We'll say it that way, because not all elites are the same. I mean, we can clump them all together if we're being shallow. That would be just as shallow as clumping all one race together or whatever. So I'm not going to do that. I know there are many elites who have been getting away with things, but I do think this year is going to be the greatest year ever to call them out and to put some restrictions in place so that it limits this situation. And that also will take about 2 or 3 years to complete. And I think someone with a lot of money, one of the elites, will fund it. And I'm not exactly sure what I'm seeing there, but I keep getting a B around it. Now, is it possible it's that man who owns Amazon? Maybe. Okay. I don't know why I'm seeing that, but I'm looking forward to that too, because then that'll, set some things straight and help to heal some people along the way. So that's just a little bit. I mean, there's probably so much more, but we have touched on a lot of stuff, and even longer than I expected. So what I'm hoping we can do now.
May I just add just one more thing I do want to say about, I mean, I know it's fascinating. We're talking about this, and I know we have to go into the signs as well in the
Yes.
short time that we have left. But I will say this. I think that really watch what happens in March, because I feel like someone is going to emerge related to who will be the next president of the US. I think that in 2024, whoever ends up being president, being crowned on the election night, is going to be somebody who hasn't been president before. who's going to represent sort of this rejection of um, the
Yes.
establishment, a rejection
Yes.
of it's not. I think it's very unlikely that it's going to be somebody who is older.
Yeah.
It's going to be somebody who really is considered a wild card, a wacky type of person, a self-made person, maybe in the tech world. I don't see it being Elon Musk. I think, we end up unconsciously sort of playing out the functions we're supposed to. Keep in mind that it is going to be this year that we are likely to see the death of one social media platform and the emergence of another. And I think that we're likely going to see the death of Twitter, but something brand new is going to emerge. And so it'll be interesting to see who that is and how that comes together. But on election night, whoever ends up being crowned president is going to represent that rejection of big money,
Good.
of big corporations, of hierarchical ideals, and is going to be, a whole other type of embodiment of representation. It'll be very interesting to see. So
Yeah.
that's the last.
Like, yeah, likely because of this revolutionary energy. It's like they have to get someone in place to calm the masses. They
Mm-hmm.
have to. And we may be calling out a revolution, but we are not ready for no leadership.
Yeah,
We
for
are
sure.
not ready for that. We are nowhere close to being able to manage that. I mean, it would just be chaos. It would be
But
chaos.
it's like it's okay to see it differently in terms of, okay, the president is a job. And maybe sometimes that job involves inspiring people and stuff, but if we can reconfigure our relationship to that person, a human being with a job that we hire, compared to expecting somebody to be our great leader, right?
Right.
That's the thing. And
Right.
that way it allows us more agency over our own lives in the
Yeah.
process. So I'm very hopeful about that. Yeah.
I love the way you put that. That was really nicely put. Absolutely. Yeah, let's look forward to changes that will really benefit all of us and not just the minorities, you know?
Now I am going to turn my camera off for just a moment because I got a vape. I got to take, and I never do that. Okay. I don't want people having a video of that of me. So I'm here. We're going to go into the signs, right?
Okay.
Okay.
All right. We'll just give you a second while everybody's waiting for my friend here. Please tap that screen. And I see many of you are making invitations. Thank you very, very much for that. I really appreciate that. If you wouldn't mind tapping the screen to send us back into the algorithm, I would really appreciate that.
Oh, I
And
need that. I love you. Thank you, Tamara.
yeah,
Thank
yes.
you.
And I would like everyone to know we're going to speak. I think we're going to start with Aries, correct?
Yes, let's do it. Let's touch on the signs now. And
Yes, we are.
thank you. Thank you again, Tamara, for inviting me. I was unexperienced. I don't want to say the V word, but yeah, I was where it came to came to TikTok live. So thank you.
Well, you
I'm
know
so,
what? Doing this will just open you up to wanting to do more.
yeah, you think so? It'll be like
Yeah.
a drug. It'll be like, oh, I gotta get that.
No, no, it's just a good feeling. I
Yeah,
think
to
it's. I
refill.
mean, when's the last time you were able to really just you're sitting in your own living room, having a chat about things that you love to talk about.
Yeah, that's true, right? Yeah.
That's really all we're doing, and we've just opened the door so other people can see in. And I'm seeing a very interesting um, downtick. I'm not sure what's going on. I've never seen so many low numbers here tonight. So this,
Oh.
I think it's because I put the word revolution in my description.
Or maybe